Hi everyone, this is my audience, and okay, let's go ahead and start. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Christina Rodriguez, and today I'm going to be talking about sex education. When I was in high school, I took sex education as a junior, and it was part of an overall course called Health. And in this course, teenagers learned anything from nutrition to how many hours of sleep they should be getting a night. And in between those two topics, there was a couple of days or maybe even a week where the focus was on sex education, which means that a presenter would come and they would set up their PowerPoint presentation, and they would start off with the anatomically correct posters of the reproductive system, and then they would skip straight to pictures of STDs. And then that was it. That was the end of the conversation. The presenter would just say, don't have sex because you will get pregnant or you will get an STD or both. Sex education is awkward and scary, and a lot of the times it's not even very informative. And it has a lot of flaws. My purpose today is to tell you about those flaws and to offer solutions to the problems those flaws present. Now, you might be thinking, why should I care about sex education? I already took that class. I don't have to suffer that embarrassment anymore. It's also my job to motivate you and to interest you in this topic because your sex education has failed you. How many of you learned how to put on a condom in a classroom setting? How many of you learned the benefits of birth control apart from not getting pregnant? These are just some of the issues that our abstinence-only sex education curriculum presents. Which brings me to my first point, our high teen pregnancy rate. According to the Office of Adolescent Health, which is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Sources, Texas was ranked 5th in the nation in teen pregnancy rates in 2015. Now, being ranked first means you have the highest teen pregnancy rate in the entire country, and Texas was 5th. Obviously, there is a very large gap between the people who are receiving abstinence-only education and the teens getting pregnant. Now, in this situation, teenager means ages 15 to 19 years old. That's high school age. That's when young women should be receiving their quality sex education, and they're not. Let's say you're 16 years old and you're about to have your first sexual encounter with your boyfriend. You don't know how to put on a condom because your sex education course at El Dorado High School didn't teach you how. And your boyfriend doesn't know either because he was in that same class right next to you. So you just say, you know what, it doesn't matter. Forget about it. And you continue. And that's how teen pregnancy happens. Which leads me to my second point, the amount of sexually transmitted infections among teenagers. Now, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, teenagers make up 25% of the sexually active population. That means out of all of the people having sex in America, a quarter of those people are actually teenagers. Again, this is 15 to 19-year-olds. And of those 25%, half of those teenagers acquire half of all the new STIs. That means 9.8 million cases of teenagers having a sexually transmitted disease, and that's per year. Now, obviously, back to my scenario with the 16-year-olds, if they decide not to use a condom, they prove themselves at risk. They put themselves at risk for having that sexually transmitted infection. Because it starts with our sex education. They don't know how to put on a condom. They don't know the consequences of not having safe sex. And it doesn't just stop there. Sex education in Texas is not orientation inclusive. That means that in that 16-year-old class, there could be another young man in there and say, you know what, I don't have to worry about this. I'm gay, and I obviously can't get pregnant. I can't get a girl pregnant because I have a boyfriend. Just because you're not at risk for teen pregnancy doesn't mean you're not at risk for a sexually transmitted infection. And it's important to understand that more and more people are coming out every day. So our sex education needs to reflect that demographic. Now you might be wondering, well, what are the solutions to these big problems? How can we turn around our our state from being 5th in teen pregnancy, how can we turn around our nation from having 9.8 million cases a year of sexually transmitted infections in teenagers? It starts with opening up and having a conversation. Alexandra Sifferlin from the New York Times says, let's have a frank conversation. Let's have that conversation with qualified teachers in classrooms. I mean, teenagers, they're already having sex. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures again, about 47% of teens say that they have already had sex in high school. That's a little under half of all the teenagers. So it's time to address the elephant in the room. If teenagers are curious about sex, it's our responsibility to arm them with the proper information in order to keep them healthy. And that information is important as well, which brings me to having a comprehensive sex education. This doesn't just mean teaching abstinence only, because as we know, that's not working. Even if we're teaching abstinence only, teens are still getting pregnant and they're still getting sexually transmitted diseases. This means that sex education should include information about how to put on a condom, about contraception, and about the psychological effects of being in a sexually active relationship. How can you tell if you're in a healthy relationship or not? That should also be a part of sex education. And it's proven that comprehensive sex education works. According to Bridget McKeon from Advocates for Youth, behavioral outcomes include delaying initiation to sex, fewer sex partners, and an increase of contraception in those who are already sexually active. All of that translates to lower teen pregnancy rates, lower sexually transmitted infection rates. It's time for teenagers to be healthy and conscious about their sex education. And it doesn't stop at sex education. It's important to address the problem from the source. Who addresses what we learn in schools? Our policymakers. So it's time to hold our policymakers accountable. I know in Texas we have a lot of conservative representatives who would rather not approve sex education in schools. They don't think it's appropriate. However, we have one state representative, her name is Mary Gonzalez, who introduced a bill to push public schools to have age-appropriate sex education. That was written in the Texas Tribune by Cassandra Pollock. This means that she's already taking the first step in making sex education mandatory and age-appropriate for students. I knew some pregnant girls in high school. When I was a senior, I would see girls as young as freshmen, that means 15-year-olds, who were already pregnant. And as much as that is a tragedy, it's also the responsibility of the people who are teaching us. That could have just as easily been me or one of my friends, but it wasn't because of circumstances I don't even know. It's time to start giving our teenagers the tools and the education they need in order to have happy and healthy sexual lifestyles. Thank you. How long is that?